Alrighty, and we should be live. Um, cool. You know, obviously, I'm here with Independent Thought, um, and he is a lefty podcaster. Not necessarily a big streamer yet, I don't believe. Um, but you know, just brought him on here to have a conversation. I've been on his podcast before, and I think it went really well. And just looking to further the conversation. Try to return the favor.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I think it was back in February now. Had quite a few people listen to it. In fact, it keeps getting new downloads like every week. So, people are still going back to it. So, obviously, it was a good conversation. People shared the episode. So, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah. Yeah, man, of course. So would you like to introduce yourself, kind of give a little bit of background, kind of, what has brought you to the left, I guess the left side of the aisle. Maybe not the far left, but wherever you're at.
Right. I mean, how much of an answer do you want?
Well,
I'll try
I
to keep
got
it brief. I'll try to keep it brief. I think for me, I never really sought out to be somebody who just picked a side and said to myself, I'm gonna be over here or I'm gonna be over there. I think as I've kind of grown up and I've just developed more of my political beliefs, I basically just kind of aligned my beliefs alongside of my views on the world. And I guess for the most part, when you kind of take it from a case by case basis, I guess I align more on the left than I do on the right. But at the same time, I think one of the reasons why I call my show Independent Thought is because at no point do I ever feel like I'm beholden to a party. Like, you're never going to see me going out of my way to defend Democrats unnecessarily in my mind. Like if they've done dumb, fucked up stuff, then I'm gonna say it because at the end of the day, I don't feel any loyalty to that party. They're corrupt as far as I'm concerned. So, it's but yeah, I guess, when I go like just issue by issue, I do find myself feeling more leftist. I think if I had it my way, I would have, had Bernie be the person who represented the Democratic Party in the past election. I don't agree with him on everything, but I feel like I align more with him than I did with Joe Biden, who I feel like is basically just a chameleon.
we can agree on that, right? That we don't think Joe Biden is the actual president, right?
I mean, he's the actual president. He just
Well,
he
he's not
has
pulling the strings.
well, that's a funny thing that I always want to think about because the question that I hear, from people who, say things like that, it's like, oh, well, Joe Biden's obviously not making these decisions. It's like, do you actually like sit here and think to yourself that Donald Trump was making every decision that was flying through his administration? Was Barack Obama making all the decisions going through his administration? Was George Bush making policy decisions? I mean, the presidency is basically just a person who delivers speeches. I mean, more or less. Like, if we're being 100% fair, I mean,
Yeah, they're
like most of the
they're just a
policy,
figurehead.
yeah, most of the policy decisions are being made by the team that is put together, right? And then the president goes out there and sells whatever the package is. So, do I think that Joe Biden is crafting, like this infrastructure legislation? No. But I also don't think that Trump orchestrated the tax cut. I feel like they delegate that to somebody else. So, that's my
Yeah, of
answer more or
course.
less. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and the vice president's very similar in that respect too. I think I don't know how
They're even
much
more
string
useless.
pulling they have. Yeah,
I mean, I really
yeah,
don't even know what the vice president does on a day-to-day basis.
yeah. Now, like, how are like, what are your thoughts on Kamala's trip down to Guatemala?
I mean, obviously, she stuck her foot in her mouth when she was making those comments about like, you know, please don't come here. Please stay where you're at. And then later on, when she had that interview, I think it was with NBC or maybe CBS. When she had that
Yeah,
interview with someone, I think the interviewer asked her, have you been to the border? And she's like, well, I haven't been to Europe. And
Right. It's like
I was
your
like,
doesn't matter.
look, here's my thing about Kamala. I mean, I just when I first saw her, because I was a political like junkie when it came to the Democratic primary process. I watched all 10 primary debates. I think there was like 3 or 4 different town halls they all did. I watched lots of interviews, um, campaign rallies. Like I was just a junkie for this stuff. So when I first saw Kamala Harris in like maybe March or April of 2019, I had a great opinion of her. But the more you got to see Kamala Harris, the more it was obvious that she was pretty fake. In fact, I think she uses that laugh like as a tactic, which is kind of gross. I think her and Andrew Yang both do that. Um, and
Well, I mean, her, Andrew Yang, Hillary Clinton does the same thing though. Like it's just like this weird laugh at awkward times. It's like
yeah, it just
who's
seems
telling
very
them to
out of
do this?
place.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like,
like
why are you laughing right now? Are you trying to seem more likable?
right.
Yeah, so Kamala is a very just underwhelming candidate, which is why I think she dropped out before the vote even took place in Iowa because she was polling at like below like 3%. So when Biden picked her, I was very confused, honestly. I knew that he wanted to pick, like a woman of color, but I was like, there had to be somebody better. I mean, there was, and
Yeah,
and you picked Kamala. But anyway, I guess to answer your question directly, I think that we're going to see more of that from her because she doesn't really know how to deliver a solid message because I don't think that she actually believes in anything. I think she seems like a politician very much like Biden who will just say what she feels is necessary, but she doesn't know how to read the room politically as well as Biden seems to. He seems to have a better grasp on what is a smart take to say in certain moments.
yeah. At least politically.
Politically, yeah.
Yeah. Um. Now, did you see what was it yesterday? The New York City mayoral race, the primary.
I saw the
Andrew Yang got
results.
blown out.
I saw the results. I mean, I guess I'm always confused by that. I mean, he must have inside numbers that the rest of us don't have, but I think he pulled out when there was only 20% reporting. And I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's the information that I saw. Is that he like, announced that he was dropping out when there was only 20% reporting. But I mean, obviously, at that point in time, he was getting blown out. But it's just like
Yeah.
that. That sucks for him. But I was never like fully invested in him. I mean, first of all, I don't live in New York City, so it's not my mayor. But I've never been like a huge defender of Andrew Yang. I thought that he was just a person who had some interesting ideas, but that's really about it. And obviously, his campaign just didn't hit with the people of New York. So
Yeah. Now, do you think that he's gonna try another run in 2024 for the presidency, or is this like is him getting blown out in New York kind of like a kind of a nail in a coffin for him?
I mean, it's not a nail in anyone's coffin, more or less. I mean, it all depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, some people seek office because they want to govern, and some people seek office because they want to get publicity. So, I mean, if it's the latter, then why not run again?
Yeah, true. I don't know. I feel like it's a striking blow to him, because New York is a very like important, obviously Democrat stronghold. And like the New York City mayor, right, tends to be like, oh, I got I think Vanessa called me on my work phone, about my car's extended warranty. So
Okay.
sorry. She calls me every day. We got a good relationship. Um, but no, like the New York City mayoral race, like is a very important position to hold, right, in politics, right?
Yeah.
It's borderline like a governorship, right? So that's why I question whether he's actually going to run again in 2024. you
Well,
know.
the way that our party politics are set up right now is that once you have the nomination of a party, then the whole party gets behind you. So basically what I'm saying right now is that if you change yourself as candidate slightly and you're able to win a democratic primary, whether that's like in a local level, a state level, a federal level, the whole party's going to be behind you. So I mean like yeah, on one hand you're saying like oh, you weren't able to win New York, so does that really make you viable for the future? Yeah, well, Biden didn't win New Hampshire, but I mean, it didn't stop the people from South Carolina from voting for him. Then the whole party got behind him. You know, the rest is kind of more or less history. So I don't think it's really the best way to look at it by using one particular race to judge a candidate as a whole.
Yeah, no, I got you. Binks baby has a comment for you. He said, "Oh hell yeah, Desmond is great."
Oh,
So,
well, thank you. Binks, I saw Binks on that first stream that I ever did. This I gotta tell you, I was a little intimidated to do that one. I'm intimidated to do it right now. This is my third time being on a stream.
yeah.
So the whole like live aspect, I'm still getting used to it. I'm more used to the whole like, oh, if I make a mistake, I can go back and redo it thing. So
Well,
yeah,
um, so like you don't show your face to like your podcast people,
I
right?
don't know. No,
Yeah.
I mean, this is actually I think in the last month I've shown my face more than I have in the whole like year and a half that I've been doing this podcasting thing.
Now, like, why is that? Why don't you, personalize it a little bit more? You know?
For a couple different reasons. One, I'll get a little personal with you for a second here. One is I have kind of nasty like anxiety,
Okay.
and I get kind of freaked out when I do things like this, and so even like on the audio form, it kind of like messes with me a little bit. So sometimes I have to take a breath and kind of pause, so on and so forth. So it's all stuff that I'm like working through, but like at the same time, it kind of like messes with me a little bit in my head. So I felt like just for me, it'd be easier on me if I didn't have to. It sounds weird, but if I didn't have to focus on being like camera focused while also like getting my thoughts organized. I guess my ability to multitask is horrendous. But also, where I'm at here in Montana, I live in a community where there's maybe like 120,000 people. So it's not that huge of a community, and there may be only a couple hundred black people. Like it's like the ratio
Yeah.
is
Okay.
so low. And so when I go out in public here, I'm easily identifiable, as you probably would be if you walked around West Philly, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, pretty much.
yeah. So and I have a pretty decent local following for my podcast. I think like 30% of my followers are in like Missoula, Montana. And
Oh,
so for
nice.
me, I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to be going out to play pool at the bar in the grocery store and having me like, hey, you said this and that about this person, and I think your take is fucking bullshit. And it's like, you know what, man, I'm trying to buy ketchup right now. Get the fuck out of here.
No, that makes sense.
It's kind of a small town vibe a little bit.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Yeah.
I like you actually do have anxiety,
Yeah.
and depression. So it's like it is very overwhelming doing this,
Yeah.
like I think, what finally like drove me to like do, like actually streaming and stuff, like politics is because like I feel like I have some decent takes from the right side
Yeah.
that might be able to kind of build a bridge, So I felt like, I'll figure it out. Like the first few streams are gonna be rough as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll figure it out. Like I was on a panel last Monday, and it was like there were some bigger names in there,
Yeah.
like people that average like 500-600 viewers at one time,
Right.
right? So I'm like, I'm kind of a little like shell shocked, right? Or a little like
Deer in the
starstruck.
headlights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like I I barely talked the entire time. but like that the one time I did talk was like a rant about like to get us back on topic because we were talking about like we were talking about like CRT being taught in schools.
Mm,
And then like that they or no, was it? No, it was a 1619 project. I'm sorry.
okay.
Being taught in schools. I got that part right. um, they kind of do actually overlap a bit, but like they were off like talking about like the is this true in the 1619 project? And it's like, no, we don't need to get into specifics. It's literally should it be taught in school, like in general, you know?
Yeah.
So like I went on like a 3 minute rant, just like no, like maybe parts of it, not all of it, you know?
You know what? It's twofold here. I think one of the things I want to do on my podcast coming up is I also want to do more like panel-based episodes. I think I've told you about that. Um,
Yep.
I feel like parts of a conversation get lost when you have too many people on a panel. Like I know that the people who have had us on, and I appreciate them having us on. Mr. Geek and Danabo. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great format, but I feel like when you have 8, 9, 10, 11 people, like you're just like you're waiting to talk the whole time, and then by the time it gets to you, it's like 7 conversations later, and you're like, do I respond to everything I just heard or the original thing I wanted to talk about? And I feel like yeah, it's easy to get off track, right?
Yep.
And then as far as like critical race theory is concerned, that is something that I personally like. I think I told you this before. I still don't know enough about it, which is why I'm gonna
Yeah.
cover it this season. But I guess like I don't want to speak definitively on something that I don't fully know all the different pieces of it to. But like I guess from the
Yeah.
brief parts that I do understand, I don't see what's wrong with teaching it. I really don't. I mean, in school. I mean, but then again, like I want to do all my research on it, before I say like definitively yes or no. But yeah,
Hmm.
I just don't know what the huge hype about it is. But I guess let's have this
Yeah.
conversation again a month from now.
Yeah, yeah, no, I wasn't trying to like segue into that, you
Yeah,
know, because I know you want to do more research on it, and
yeah.
like I probably still need a little bit more research, but um, Bink says Desmond's right. It's not enough people. They need at least 25 on panels. So, um, no, so like what did you hear the MILF discourse recently?
No, I saw that though because I was supposed to show up for that stream, and then I had family come into town, so I couldn't show up for that round table. I think it was on a Sunday, like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I saw the topics that were going to be discussed, and I was like, "MILF is a slur." It's like,
Right.
I just like my girlfriend came home later that day, and I asked her about it, and I was just like, "Do you think that's a slur?" And she was like, "What?" So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was like, a little confused. That's the first I'm hearing about this, but I guess
Yeah.
we're living in a time where I guess you can find creative ways for anything to be offensive.
Exactly. I was like, honestly, like my girlfriend asked me if she was a MILF. You know, I'm like,
Yeah,
so like, because my girlfriend's a mom, you know,
yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, of course you are. Like, you kidding me? And she loves every second of it, you know. So I'm
yeah.
like, all right, you know,
I guess the short answer to that question is it depends on who it is. I guess some people might find it offensive, some might not. I guess conversation over.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like, are you gonna run up? Are you gonna run up in a grocery store to some like woman that looks a little bit older than you and be like, "Hey, are you? You're such a milf." You know, like no, like you
No.
don't do that.
I mean, I
Like,
I wonder about the people who do that.
Aldi, I am the righty and he is the lefty, but you know, I'm kind of center right and he's not Twitch politics left. So.
It's a very descriptive.
I mean, dude, like, I guess since you've just kind of like burst onto the scene here on Twitch politics, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are what are your opinions of some of the people that you're running into? Like, do you think like Was it eye-opening? Was it not
Yes.
eye-opening? You know.
Yes, it was very eye-opening. I mean, again, only did two of these, but in the two times that I did it, it felt like I'm not going to name names, but I felt like there
Yeah,
were some
no
people,
names.
yeah, there were some people who were there to have conversations in good faith and legitimately wanted to have a back and forth discourse. And then there were some people who didn't really give a shit about what your opinion was. It was all about like, hey, you need to just understand that I'm right, the end. And if you have anything to argue with me about it, then you have no idea what you're talking about, the end. And my whole thing is like, if you're gonna be that person, then why come to this format? Like
Yeah.
why come to a format where everyone's having a discussion and you're not willing to discuss? Like you're not discussing, you're dictating. And maybe you're just putting on a persona. Maybe you're like, oh, I've built up like 500 followers on Twitch, and so I need to be this person now. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It-
I'm always like weary of people who seem to take themselves a little too seriously.
right. It's like, all right, we're talking on Twitch, about politics, and none of us can actually form policy or anything.
Right.
So it's kind of like, all right. I mean, like these are really important conversations to have. Don't get me wrong, because some of the discourse that does happen here on Twitch, like it does bleed out into the mainstream sometimes.
Well, we're having
So like,
conversations that are mainstream, more or less.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and it's like I don't know, um, a bunch of lefties, like I've come to find, like are or a bunch of people in general, righties and lefties, like are looking for Binks has to go. He's gonna DM both of us. All
Oh.
right.
Well, thanks for showing up, Binks. We appreciate you.
Thanks, baby. All right. I look forward to your DM. And Aldi said, "Ooh, an open-minded lefty. I like that."
I mean, we'll see. Ask me about the Eagles. Might not be so open-minded.
Right. But no, I think like the conversations are very important to have, but if you're going to come into it with like a bad faith, like just looking for owns, what is the point? Like you're not engaging in like each other's positions, whether they be crazy and outlandish or, um pretty reasonable. Like you're not engaging in the points. You're just kind of like, oh well that point is horrible, and you're a hard conservative, or you're a communist, or you know what I mean. It's like I don't know. I don't get the whole
No,
the
you
whole
you have to be able to
thing.
deconstruct the conversation in a way. I mean, like if the person you're talking to has a point of view, and whether you agree with it or disagree with it, like it should be on you to acknowledge that conversation and to break it down piece by piece in order to truly have a back and forth. If you come into something and you're just saying like, this is my stance on this, and anyone who disagrees is the problem, then why are we here? Like
Yeah.
why are we here? Are we just here to stroke your ego to make you feel better about yourself? Like, is that why we're here? And this goes for like people on the right and the left. Because
Oh yeah.
I've seen it on both sides. This isn't
Yep.
like a more like a partisan thing here, but it's just like, okay, well, I get it. You really feel like strongly about your feelings here, but if that's how you feel, then why even come to a conversation? You know?
Yeah.
So
Um.
that's been my to answer your question. That has been my take on Twitch politics. Some good people, some bad people. The real world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's the same everywhere.
yeah,
You do get people who are like terminally online though on Twitch.
yeah.
You
I
know,
feel like everyone has their social media platform. You know what I mean? Like,
yep,
if you're a person who's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, like people have their lanes. They're like, yeah, I have these other social media platforms, but I'm mostly on here. So I do see that there's some people who live on Twitch the way I live on Instagram. You know?
yeah,
So
yep.
yeah.
Now, I guess like, how do you feel so far? the Biden administration has actually been doing. I guess we'll get away from like the shitting on Twitch politics for a little bit.
Yeah. The Biden administration, how have they been doing? They have been they have been playing the game fairly well. As far as, and I'm not saying that they're out there accomplishing things, but they it feels like the people in this administration understand how to ride the political waves to their advantage.
Mhm.
And it feels like they're doing a good job at maintaining their polling numbers. So it
Yeah.
feels like they know how to stay on the right side of every ebb and flow. Like when people come out and talk about the unemployment numbers, like Biden's like team finds the right way to answer that question, or when people talk about the southern border, they find a way to redirect the conversation somewhere else, so we don't have to talk about the southern border. Or when you talk about the fact that like, oh, you're not getting done the policy proposals that you said that you were going to. Oh, well, it's Joe Manchin's fault, which it kind of is. Uh, so I feel like they're doing an expert job right now of basically finding ways to stay semi-popular while literally doing nothing.
While literally doing nothing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I personally feel like like there has been some like decent things Biden has done, believe it or not. Um, he in regards to China, which I was actually very surprised about, he seems to be still taking a tough stand on China and
Yeah, they
not
didn't change any of the trade
yeah,
policies.
yeah, and not immediately going back into the TPP, which was just like a terrible trade agreement that we signed,
Yeah.
and like so like that was like pleasantly surprising to me. But I'm very curious how he's going to deal with like the inflation that we have coming up,
Mm,
that's going up, and
yeah.
then with like fuck, forgot my words, but like how to deal with the inflation, how to deal with the unemployment, how to deal with shortages of various goods across the states. Like I'm
Yeah.
very curious how he's going to handle that, because I haven't seen much other than oh, we're gonna do away with the well, he hasn't said this, but certain states have. We're gonna do away with the unemployment insurance. That extra, $300.
Right.
We're
I
gonna
think
do away
my
with it
state was
early.
the first to do that, honestly. Well,
Maybe I'll move to Montana.
well, I think they were the first. I don't think the first to maybe do it, but the first to announce that they were doing it. So our unemployment insurance is ending, I think, next week. Uh,
Okay.
but with all that being said, I mean, all of them end in September anyway. So it's
Yep.
not. So when I hear people talk about the unemployment insurance, like specifically, they're like, "Oh, these people are just living off unemployment for the rest of their lives. Like, are they like dying in September?" I mean, because
I mean,
it's not like it's gonna be like for like years on end here. We're talking about benefits that are lasting until until football season. So,
yeah.
well, the beginning of football season. So, um, but yeah, I mean, Biden really hasn't faced a true challenge like in his presidency yet. I mean, I guess that like that's really kind of like blown back in his face. I mean, he came in, had to deal with the stimulus package right away. They're able to get that kind of pushed through. And then since then, I feel like because everything's opening up right now, the country's more or less just like turned its eyes away from politics. Like no one's talking about what's going on in the day to day. No one's bitching about what's happening in Washington. Like it feels like people are just happy to be back to doing more normal stuff, being, like without masks and going back to full capacity and in all these different events. So it just feels like we're in such like a lull right now that it's Biden's really hasn't had to face like true like backlash yet. So it's hard to say how he'll manage these things because he hasn't faced anything really yet.
Yeah. No, very true. I mean, everyone is very focused on the whole opening up thing. But you know, obviously on the conservative side, the side that didn't win, right?
Yeah.
We're raising the alarm on like the massive well, what appears to be mass inflation coming. The unemployment rate, which they have missed their mark the past few months, one
Yeah.
in a really big way. And just the economy's not picking back up the way that it should be, like with the shortages everywhere as well. You know,
Right. Well,
so
there's a
so
good reason for that. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, we're sounding like up. The right side is sounding the alarm because we didn't win, whereas I feel like from observing what I've seen, the left side seems to be doing kind of what they did when Obama got elected, right? Like Obama got elected, and then they all kind of went back in their homes, back in their caves. You know what I mean? Oh, we're all good now. Democrat won. You know, whereas there are legitimate things to like look into and apply pressure on, and it appears like they're not as like the majority of the Democrat side, like they're not doing that. As far as like normal people, normies, not politicians because they never do anything. But you
Right.
know,
Well, let's be fair. I'll address two things here. One is, the thing that you were just talking about, and the shortages. Um, I mean, yeah, let's be fair about one thing. Regardless of, what party you stand by, there are most people in this country don't pay attention to politics on a day in and day out basis, right? Most people just don't. I mean, there's weirdos like you and me who pay attention to politics year round, but like most people don't. And so for the average everyday person, like go to work, they get home, they're thinking about, going out with friends or what's on Netflix, so on and so forth. Like the only time that they're engaged with this stuff is if the media highlights it. And so they have most of these people who are just like casual observers of the world around them, right? And there's nothing wrong
mhm.
with that. It just, like that's just mostly what it is. And so, the true gripe here isn't with the average Democrat voter. The true gripe here is the fact that the media has turned itself off,
Well,
right?
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. I can criticize the media all day.
Right, but I'm saying like
Mildly.
if the media was covering the things that were still happening on large part, the left media, if they were covering all the inadequacies in our country right now, you probably would have more people outraged. But like as you said, it's a fair critique. When the right says that most of the media is left leaning, they're not wrong. Yeah, I think that you'd have to put blinders on to tell yourself that that was not the case. Of course, it's the case, and I think it's up to all of us, unfortunately, to basically understand where we're getting our information from, whether it's from the left or from the right. But yeah, so media is not really doing what they did under Trump, and so because
Yeah,
of that, the average person is kind of just checked out. On the shortages side, um, I gotta tell you, I mean, Biden's inheriting this problem, but this is a problem that doesn't really stem from the Trump administration or the Obama administration. This actually goes back to the Bush and Clinton administrations, when both of those presidents went out of their way to basically say, to make these bad trade agreements, as you were talking about, and send all of our manufacturing just to different countries, right? And so now we're a country that doesn't manufacture that much stuff. And so now we're having shortages because we're having issues basically importing goods and services from other countries. In fact, I think I just saw a report came out just recently that said like again for like I don't know how many months in a row now we are importing so much more than we're exporting, and so we are just like we just don't manufacture enough goods and services here in America, and because of that we're dealing with shortages everywhere right now. I mean, some companies are trying to fill that gap a little bit. I know that Intel is like trying to like make more semiconductors in Arizona right now. But yeah, I don't know exactly how you fix that problem. I'm not an economist, but
yeah,
obviously our lack of manufacturing is hurting us. And because of that fact, we are having shortages of so many different goods right now in the country.
yeah. Did you get that? I watched that Sagar Breaking Point, right? Like
Yeah,
I forget, was it yesterday that he
I
was talking about this?
maybe.
I think it was because like
Yeah,
it's funny because like you said a few things that he said,
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
like
No,
obviously we're
I
We're
start
both big
there.
fans.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I start there. I usually how I treat my like research my politics is I start with them and then I branch off what they like talked about. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go check out that article they posted, or I'll go check out
yeah.
that research. So they're always like my starting point.
Yep.
Yeah,
No, and I like their new show. It's pretty cool.
yeah.
I haven't like subbed and got like everything, but no, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to get distracted, but
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
it was just funny because it was like verbatim almost in some instances, and I was like, "Hey," you know, um, no, but like that is a very good point that the Clinton and the Bush administration did ship a lot of our manufacturing overseas. Um and I don't think Obama helped,
Well, no,
I
they didn't
believe
bring
I
anything
believe
back.
yeah, like I believe the TPP was signed under Obama during the Obama years. And that was very dangerous. And then also, something that has me very concerned though is with the whole Taiwan thing in China, right? Most of our semiconductors and stuff are made in Taiwan,
Right.
right? So if China invades Taiwan and then we get no more semiconductors, guess what? We are screwed, you know?
Yeah, and obviously, like it seems like we're making steps right now to kind of like fix that gap. But honestly, it shows a lack of kind of like caring that we allowed it to get to this point in the first place. I mean, because it's not just semiconductors, it's also like, medicine, it's also like all kinds of like building materials. I mean, we get so much stuff from different countries. I mean, whether it's China or Mexico, Indonesia, I mean, like you name it. Like we're not producing enough here. And the tax structure has incentivized companies to ship jobs off seas or overseas or to different countries. I mean, I guess Mexico isn't across the sea, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have companies like even like car companies. I mean, like I think it was Ford, went out and said that after the 2017 tax cut that they were going to keep jobs in Ohio and Michigan, and then they turned around the next year and sent those jobs to Mexico, you know.
Yep.
And so it doesn't seem like this issue belongs to one administration, but nevertheless, it is an issue that no administration seems to have been able to solve yet.
Yeah. And I think um excuse me. I think Trump would have, well, was actually trying to, or at least he was talking about trying to. You know, like he did restructure NAFTA. He did get us out of the TPP. Because he did realize that they were bad deals for us. So I think um, maybe not him himself got us out of them, but or restructured them, but
His people.
his administration did.
Yeah.
And I think like those were important things, important steps. Like they're not foolproof solutions, obviously, but I think it was a step in the right direction. And I would like to see Biden actually do something about it. So this way, the next time another pandemic hits or something else happens that we can't get our stuff from other countries, that we can actually self-sustain because like we are on like life support right now, like when it comes to sustaining, with what we had, you know?
It doesn't make any sense, honestly. I feel like this country is basically just run by the richest people in the world. And instead of doing things that make sense from a country standpoint, like, oh, we need to be protected this way and the third, it's like, how can we make the most short term profit? Who gives a fuck about the repercussions?
Yeah.
And it feels like that's how our country is governed. And whoever is in office is just an extension of that, basically, more or less. Because, you just see it time and time again. As the years go on, like policy seems to be crafted towards making sure the rich get more rich. And then, like, well, maybe we'll just deal with the repercussions later, but maybe we won't. And that just
Yeah.
seems like more or less just how we treat every situation.
Yeah. Like, and like you can look at like the mass printing of money the same way, right? Where it's like Oh, well, we haven't felt any real repercussions yet, so let's just keep printing money and until we do. And like like that's the way, obviously it's a very simple way of looking at it, but it is kind of true though, right? Both the Democrats and Republicans do this, so I'm not just attacking the Democrats, but they just happen to be in power right now. Um, but they they mass print, money and expect nothing to ever happen. Like, oh no, it's cool. It's cool. That let our grandkids deal with it.
You
You
know,
know.
it is a question. I was having this conversation with another person on the right, I think just like a month ago. I went onto their podcast and I think had this identical conversation. Which I have to say, on one hand, I understand it, and on the other hand, I'm like, why does this conversation only come up when a Democrat's in office? But nevertheless, it is an important conversation to have because at the end of the day, at a certain point, if you're printing out more money than you have goods and services, then eventually it catches up with you. But I truly don't know what that line is. Maybe the people who run the Federal Reserve or economists like feel as though that this level of spending isn't actually going to bite us in the ass, or maybe they don't care. I actually don't know enough to say definitively whether or not they're making the wrong decision because I still see our dollars being like the global currency. Like maybe you can tell me about why that is. I mean, if we're like essentially like creating this high level of inflation.
Well, I think like the reason why the dollar is still basically the global currency is because of the petrodollar, whereas like oil has to be traded in dollars across like the globe,
Yeah,
which is arguably the most like the biggest resource, right, that every country needs.
yeah.
Um, oh, hey Rye, how are you? Um, you know, like I think that's the reason why like there's a bunch of conspiracy theories going on with like the petrodollar and stuff that I haven't really done a lot of research on. Um, but that's basically what kind of keeps us afloat, And I'm really interested in like the economic side of things, and I'm trying to, do more research when it comes to, like the petrodollar and like inflation and just trying to figure all that out. But you know, as far as the right not criticizing like the debt, right, when the right's in power, um you know it goes kind of both ways. The left doesn't criticize the debt when the left's in power either, but when the
I
right's in
mean,
power you hear deficit spending.
do you
So
though?
it
I think the left's actually they're consistent on the fact they just don't care across the board. So that's actually where I kind of I'll push back on
um,
that a little bit. I feel like the left has never complained about spending.
I think I've heard it a couple times during the Trump years, but yeah, whatever. Um, I'll give you that. I'll give it to you
Yeah.
because they're definitely quieter than the Republicans. But personally, like I can point to the massive spending that Trump did last year, and put that on him. Like we spent a shit ton of money that we don't have last
Well,
year, which was needed,
yeah,
which
I was
was
gonna say if
needed.
there was ever a year to do it, that's the time you do it, right?
Yeah, no, but we are still going to have to face the effects of that. Like just because it was needed doesn't mean that we won't still see the effects.
Right. Well, let's just talk about this for a quick second here, because there's two different points I want to make about this particular conversation. It feels like deficit spending rhetoric and what you would call Joe Manchin wanting bipartisanship. It feels like the exact same thing to me. And so what I mean by that is it feels like when Republicans are talking about legislation, they talk about we can't raise the deficit. And then I hear Democrats right now talking about like, oh, well, we can't make legislation until we have bipartisanship. It just feels like it's both sides trying to find ways not to get things done. You know, like they're just using it as an excuse not to pass legislation. Like, oh, we could pass legislation, but that spending though, like we can't spend money on that. You know, the better question I really have is if the idea more or less to shrink the deficit is just that the federal government has to take in more in taxes than it's spending in its annual budget, then why aren't we going after people who don't pay taxes? I mean, because like honestly, just as truthfully speaking, if that really is the case, because there's two ways to go out about this, right? Either you spend less or you tax more. Obviously, whenever you say tax more, half the country goes, ugh, none of that. Granted, I give you that. I don't want to be taxed more. But in an era where we're constantly talking about people taking advantage of benefits, I am disgusted by the fact that there's not a real unison between left and right on asking people who make the most money in this country to not pay more in taxes, but just to pay taxes. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me that there are thousands of people in this country, people who make nine figures or billionaires rather, who are able to avoid the tax system using various loopholes and being able to effectively pay nothing in tax or getting rebates. Like those people not paying their taxes in a sense might be by themselves creating a deficit every single year. Because if they did, how much extra money would be taking into the system that might be creating a surplus?
Mm, okay, yeah, no, I see your point there, and like, I for one like am fine with the whole tax the rich rhetoric, but without what like to an extent, I like if they pay their fair share, like just
Yeah, I'm not
what I
asking
mean
for
by
the
fair share is like pay what I pay, you know what I mean? Like,
that, and that's all I'm saying here. I'm not trying to make
yeah.
it so like I'm not going after the whole like Elizabeth Warren 90% wealth tax. I feel like that's a load of BS as far as I'm concerned. But there's no reason that Jeff Bezos should be paying less in an effective tax rate than you or me. Like that
Hmm.
is insane. And that like just fixing that for the billionaire class would be dramatic as far as just by itself. We would change the conversation around deficit because we'd probably be operating a surplus every single year.
I don't know if we'd be operating a surplus, but I think it would be a little bit better. Um, yeah, because like the deficit that we're spending every year just keeps growing and growing and growing, you know? Um, so I don't know. Obviously, like I haven't run the numbers, you know.
Right.
But like it would be better, like no doubt. But the problem is though, like with the tax codes and whatnot, is we have people who are um in government that write the tax codes, right? That um know there's loopholes, right? And there's always going to be loopholes, unfortunately.
But can I just time this out right here? There doesn't have to be. Like that's really the issue here, and that should be something that people on both sides should demand. This shouldn't be like the left attacks the rich all the time. Like we should all be like, hey, either there's loopholes for everyone or there's loopholes for no one. Like what is this bullshit? Like why do the rich
Well,
have loopholes?
I mean, I'm sure. Well, because they have a lot of money that can pay a
Right, but
bunch of
but
people to
I know
find
why
those
they have
loopholes.
it, but we should both agree that they shouldn't have them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that they shouldn't, but I guess like in a practical sense, like for me, like what I'm thinking is that they will have these loopholes regardless, constantly. It doesn't matter who writes the tax code. There's going to be somebody, you know, somewhere that's going to get paid a lot of money to figure out how to beat it, which is messed up, but it's an unfortunate world we live in,
No, no, the whole
Um,
thing's an unfortunate world we live in. But I guess
so
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, you're good. So like, I guess my prescription for like solving like the deficit would be, to curb spending elsewhere. You know, um, we can talk about the military budget, curb some spending there. We can curb some spending, obviously, that this was like a hot topic in the omnibus spending bill, right?
Yeah,
Was the
the money
spending
we
money
send
on like
overseas.
yeah, to like Pakistan for their gender studies. Like it was only a few million, but it's like, all right, like why are we spending millions of dollars there when like we can spend it back home, you know?
Yeah, we can stop sending money
Or
to Israel every year, and Egypt, and Brazil, and just I mean anywhere, honestly.
yeah, and like I think I would more I would like to see that happen, you know. Um I think that's more practical for that to happen as well. Um as
I'm
far
not.
as like well, like maybe not Israel, but
I'll say Israel.
yeah,
What?
you'll say Israel,
I was
but
just like,
like
it's like that doesn't make any sense to me personally. It's like, why would you send money to another first world country? It's like us giving money to the UK. Like, here you go. It's like, come on, they're a first world country. They don't need our aid.
yeah.
I mean, if we are gonna send aid somewhere, why would you send aid to another rich country? You know what I mean? I mean, that doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
Well, I think we do it to them for geopolitical purposes,
Which is wrong. Like,
Well,
bring that
it's
money home.
it's wrong, but I do I understand why they're doing it. I think they should get less. Don't get me wrong, but I think that they do serve a purpose for America,
I
in
mean,
the region.
anything can serve a purpose for America. That doesn't mean that we should give our money to it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
I see where we disagree here on. But like, yeah, I think you're talking about spending less, and I want to say just first and foremost, I'm not against that. I mean, I don't see any reason why it can't be a combination of both. Why you can't have a strategy where you're making sure that people should be taxed who aren't being taxed, make sure that they're being taxed while also cutting spending that doesn't need to exist currently. There is obviously like common sense solutions to fixing this problem. It's just obvious that the people in charge, no matter who's in power, has not had the desire to fix these problems because they could if they wanted to.
no, no, of course they could, but let's face it, like if they redo the tax structure, right? Um, a lot of the politicians are going to be hurt too, you know, and like it's such a it's so messed up because like we expect these people to you know do what's best for our country, but then it seems like a lot of times they end up doing what's best for themselves, you know. Um,
Yeah, well, did you?
and
Oh, sorry, I keep
no,
keep cutting
go
you off.
ahead.
That's
No,
my
you're
fault.
good,
Okay.
man. No, you're good,
Uh,
man. Go for it. You're my
I
guest.
literally just did a quick like little like bonus episode of my podcast talking about Joe Manchin. And one of the things that came up when I was looking into him was that after he voted no or came out and said that he would not vote for certain pieces of Biden's legislation, found out that like right after that his super PAC got some money from the Chamber of Commerce, and then I think it was like a week later, the Koch network gave him some money, and they said as long as he would vote against the new voting rights bill, that they would give him some money to his super PAC. And then like a week after that, there was a report that came out where they found some leaked audio about him being on a Zoom call with just several like billionaires and like investors from like large companies, but they didn't name who those people were. But you could hear Manchin talking about how he wanted to ask those people if those people would donate money to certain Republicans to get them to flip their votes on the January 6th commission, not because he cared about that, but rather because he wanted to stick it to the left and say that, see, we can do bipartisan things. And I'm like, I like the fact that we're living in a time now where we can. I mean, because we all have always known that politicians are corrupt, but I like that we're living in a time right now where we can literally just like push it right back in their face. It's like, oh, okay, Joe Manchin, like
Yeah.
you're having these private meetings with billionaires about how you want to have them pay Republicans to vote yes to prove that you can be bipartisan. Like, what
Mhm.
kind of bullshit is that?
Yeah. And unfortunately, oh, sorry, excuse me. Um, like Joe Manchin holds like a lot of power right now. Like he has like absolute power at the moment.
Right, because he wants
Um,
to wield it. I mean, honestly, there's nothing stopping, I mean, literally any one senator from holding that power in Washington right now. Like, for instance, like if Marco Rubio wanted to go rogue and say, like, I am going to vote with the Democrats unless, the Republicans give me what I want right now or something like that. Or if Bernie Sanders wanted to be like, you're not getting my vote until we push this legislation more left. Like any one senator could use that power right now with a 50-50 split. It's just Joe Manchin's just willing to be the person in the news every week, more or less.
yeah. So we have a new chatter, Best and Strong, 95. He says Republicans have the best cookouts, hella beers. Democrats throw potlucks with the lol emoji. Um,
It's right. It's
and
okay.
BYOS, bring your own shit.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with bringing your own shit to the cookout. I mean, as far as I'm
No.
concerned, like I'm grilling, you better bring some shit.
I agree, though. Republicans do have the better cookouts. I will fight you on that one, my friend. But
uh,
no, Joe Manchin just wants to wield the power, and which is fair because he also is a Democrat in freaking West Virginia.
let
You
me
know.
let me talk about that. Let me talk about that. Oh my
All
God.
right, all right, give it to me.
All right. That is a bunch of him saying that like, well, I have to hold these conservative views because I'm in West Virginia. It's just more or less it's just more bullshit smokescreen. Okay, let me tell you why. Because if that was truly the case, that he was so afraid of his voters rejecting him and not supporting him in the next election, that's why he has to take all these conservative stances, then tell me how you square that logic with not once but twice voting to impeach Donald Trump in a state where he gets 70% of the votes.
No, very true. No, what I mean is like the Democrat, like the Democrat Party, though, like they need him,
They
to
don't
win in West Virginia.
They don't need him.
Uh,
They don't need. I mean,
uh,
there's a good chance that I mean, no offense to your state. I guess it's still technically my state too. But I mean, I think there's a good chance that Democrats pick up that Pat Toomey seat when he retires in 2022. So I mean, and there's a good chance you pick up some other states, across the country as well. So you don't really have to rely on one state. I mean, if we lost
well,
West Virginia to another Republican, it's not like it's the death nail for the Democrats.
no, it's not the death nail, but with the Republicans like being in control of gerrymandering in the 2022 elections, right? Like it's very possible that the Democrats either lose the House or the Senate or both. You
Well,
know,
gerrymandering will only affect the House, but
yeah, true.
that legislation that they're trying to pass right now would stop the gerrymandering as it currently exists. And I gotta tell you, on a separate topic, and I'll keep this one brief, gerrymandering's fucking horseshit. I don't care who's drawing the lines. I mean,
Yeah,
truthfully, I mean, like, whether you're talking about the lines in North Carolina that are advantageous to the Republicans, or you're talking about the lines that are drawn in Maryland, which are advantageous to the Democrats, I mean, it's just a bunch of garbage. And honestly, I don't really think that the individual parties should have control over this. That should like if there was ever a call for bipartisanship, it should be over gerrymandering because
yeah,
these individual parties shouldn't be able to draw the lines to benefit themselves. It's garbage. It honestly is. It doesn't help anybody. It's not helping people in those districts. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, just find a way to draw these lines more fair. And if there are a bunch of squares and shit, who the fuck cares? Like these random ass lines that are just drawn all over the place like this. Like come on, man. You know?
No,
Mhm.
it's terrible. I mean, gerrymandering is terrible, but it's been around and both sides have used it. And I don't blame the Democrats for at this moment in time when they do hold such a slim House majority, and with not holding the majority of state legislators,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't surprise me that they're now trying to push it through. You know,
I mean, to be fair, they should have always pushed it through.
well, they should have, but I feel like the timing of it is very convenient. You know,
It is very
um,
convenient. It is.
uh, and it's like, well, gerrymandering's been a thing for a long time, right? Why now? Why all of a sudden now when you have a slim House majority are you going to try and get rid of it? You know,
Right.
it's kind of like a mask off thing for me. It's like, all right, cool. Well, obviously you're just trying to keep it the way it is so you keep your majority, or you have a better chance of keeping your majority.
Right. And I'll speak to that for a second here because, again, I want to give a shout out to the Winner Gets Nothing podcast. They had me on like a month ago. I think I was just talking about these guys. And I had this same exact conversation with that dude. And I'm going to reiterate what I said on that podcast, which is, uh, for me, I'm under no illusion whatsoever that the Democrats, actually care about the issues. I mean, I think that they're corrupt the same way I think the Republicans are corrupt. And so when I see them cheerleading for this, I understand that they're doing it to maintain power. But regardless of that, I don't think that necessarily that means that people shouldn't support it. And what I mean by that is like, if it's a good policy, I don't care that they're just doing it for their own advantage. Like in the same way that I think that DC should be a state. I know that Democrats are pushing for that right now because they're trying to help themselves in the Senate. I get that. They see that as 2 seats automatically for them. Duh. But at the same time, that doesn't change the fact that DC should be a state. That's how I think about it. So I'm like, yeah, I see you're getting it for a power grab, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a good idea.
I mean, we can dive into that and like the whole DC being a state thing. Like DC is about like 68 square miles, right?
Yeah.
And in the Constitution, it says the district should be no larger than 10, right? So I believe that DC kind of took land from Virginia and Maryland, if I'm, remembering correctly. Um, and Virginia took their land back, and basically the extra 48 square miles is part of Maryland. And, you know, I would like to see Maryland try to take that back, and then DC still not remain a state with the 10 square miles because they can't,
Yeah.
constitutionally. Um, but the the surrounding, I guess, what would it be? 58 square miles, like that should go back either back to Maryland or back to Virginia, whatever state owns it,
No.
whatever state originally had it.
Yeah, I don't see, and personally, this is where I'll probably detract from other people on this issue on the left, is like, I don't see anything wrong with that. Because I think for me, it comes down to, it's not about like, let me cheerlead for the Democratic Party really quick and like, let's see if we can get 2 more Senate seats. It's like, these people, it's just basic stuff. Taxation without representation. Like, these
Hmm.
people are being taxed, they don't have any senators. And in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm like, okay, well, if the answer to that is have the areas of DC right now become Maryland or just like extra Maryland, I don't see anything wrong with that. At least they have Senate representation at that point in time. But at the same time, this conversation really isn't unique to DC. I mean, I don't think that this situation should be the same for any of our territories. And if these territories aren't actually states, then we should just let them be their own countries. Like truthfully,
Hmm.
like if it should either be Guam is a state or it's its own country. Like it shouldn't be a situation where it's like you get to vote in the primary, but you don't have any electoral votes. Like that's nonsense. While we tax these people, Puerto
Right.
Rico, like the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, you just like that doesn't make any sense to me. Like this whole idea of territories, that's just like old school like bullshit imperialism, and let's leave that back in the 20th century. Either be a state or let them go be their own country.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of them like don't even want to be a country, I feel,
Then they
as
should
far
be a
as
state.
like
Yeah.
from polling. Well, I mean, they don't want to be a state. That's what I meant. Sorry. Um, like Puerto Rico is kind of 50-50, but I think I saw some polling numbers out of like Guam and like some of those other other territories over there, that were like pretty sure they didn't want to be a state,
Yeah.
you know. And I think, it should be up to them, and then it should be up to us, as far as states go. Like the states have to basically agree with it,
Right.
and like I don't see a problem with it because I mean, hell, they've been territories for how long? Like, and it's like, at what point do we say, all right, enough's enough. Like, you guys got to vote on this year, or we're done. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but
I'm an advocate for equality at the end of the day. I feel like everyone who is a citizen of this country should have representation in Congress in both houses, you know?
now, yeah. Now, I guess I would. My question to you would be like, with the Constitution saying that like the 10 square miles for the district, right?
For DC.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
will not be a state, right? Um, or yeah, will not be a state. So, like, what about those people that live in those 10 square miles? You know, because
It,
constitutionally, it says, you know what I mean?
well, there's probably a smart way to work around it. I mean, like I don't think there's probably there might be some hiccups with it because I'm trying to think of this question on the fly here, but maybe you're a resident of DC, but you also maybe you're only taxed through Virginia, or maybe you're only taxed through Maryland, and therefore since you're taxed through those states, you'll get to vote in Virginia or Maryland's elections. So technically, you'd be more or less a resident of those states while still living in DC, and
Yeah,
therefore
no,
your
that,
representation would fall underneath one of those states.
yeah, no, I got you. Like that would be fair, you know. And like, I don't know what we do with that extra 58 square miles of DC at the moment, because what if Maryland is just like, no, fuck you. We don't want you back. You know.
It does pose a problem, right? If Maryland's like, yeah, we don't want that area. I think at the end of the day, you kind of have to have some kind of decision here. Now this is just me again, obviously. I mean, just saying
Yeah.
that I think that everyone who's a citizen should have representation. I think Washington as a whole has just pushed this issue aside for so long, like, we don't have to deal with it. It's not that many people. Who cares about their concerns? So we just don't deal with it. But that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I agree it's not the right thing to do, but it's like, what if Maryland's like, no, fuck you, and then Virginia's like, no, fuck you, and then it's like, well,
DC becomes a
that
state.
but then it has to be approved by all the states as well.
Yeah, no, it would. It would. I mean, obviously, anytime you change the Constitution, you need to get, was it 37 or 38 states to ratify it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you're gonna get that in this political climate.
No, probably not. But at the end of the day, I think you still have to have these conversations because, you know, we're talking about an Overton window, more or less, right? Like,
Yeah,
so you can't shift it if you're not having conversations. And
yeah,
that's kind of where I stand on this. It's just like we haven't talked about this enough, therefore it hasn't been a part of national discourse, therefore not enough people have opinions on it, so on and so forth.
yep. Let's talk about the Overton window, right? So, like today, right? I am considered a conservative, basically,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I believe like 10 years ago, basically what I'm saying now, right, is very similar to what the Democrat Party was saying.
The Democratic
You
Party
know?
was a lot more conservative then than it is now, yes.
Yeah, like the Overton window is shifting, pretty quickly to the left, right?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
And you know, I guess, like, does it concern you that it's moving further and further to the left? Like, are there concerns there?
I mean, yes and no. Um, on one hand, it is a byproduct of its environment. You know, when you have a country that from its inception champions free speech and people use that speech to persuade others to their speech and so on and so forth down the line to where national conversations change, that's just freedom of speech taking its natural course in real time. And conservatives, primarily have always been the ones who have said, like, we absolutely under no circumstances should curb free speech. And so this is one of the repercussions of not curbing free speech. The Overton window moves left. Um, but at the same time, there are some concerning things that I see, especially coming out of this more or less what I call like Sith mentality, where it's like, if you're not with me, then you're my enemy. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I'm concerned by that, but at the end of the day, I don't think that any movement comes without its negatives. And so while there are a lot of things on the left ideology that I like, there are some things I don't like. Yeah, but I guess if I were taking a pie chart of everything going on the left right now, I would say that there's more that I like than I don't like. And so, yeah, I'm going to focus on the things I don't like, but I'm also going to, take a moment to, appreciate what I do like.
Yeah, no, I got you. I guess like so thinking from a lefty perspective, like this is what I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah.
In this instance, at least, it's like I feel like it would be concerning that if we keep pulling and pulling so far to the to the left, right? You're gonna make that right umbrella very, very large, right? You're gonna end up leaving a bunch of people behind if they like basically stay true to like what they believe in, right? Um, which I guess for me that would be concerning if I was a lefty, you know. Um, but like me as a right winger, right? I want to welcome everybody. You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, yeah, like they keep pulling you. There's some crazy stuff going on over there. You know, we're pretty cool here in the middle. You know what I mean?
No,
Um,
I know what you mean.
and so like that's something that I feel we might end up seeing, you know, which will be very interesting to see what happens if that does end up happening, you know. At the moment, obviously in these online political spheres, right? We are seeing, more and more left, 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 right?
Yeah.
But in reality, I don't necessarily see it, you know. I see pieces of it, but not obviously not as you know crazy as we see here. But
Well,
like
I feel
what
like
do you
there's a lot of conservatives out there. I just feel like a lot of conservatives don't want to have these conversations. I think that's why there's so few of them in spaces like Twitch, or why you have so few like conservative podcasters, so on and so forth. And I don't know why that is, personally. I mean, I understand that some of these conversations aren't always engaging, or they're not always like so like civil. I understand that, but at
Mhm.
the same time, I also I know that people on the left, I guess, are consistently lining up to have these conversations. Maybe I want to ask you a question now. Like, why do you think that so many people on the right are basically refraining from jumping into spaces like this to have these debates?
I think like a lot of righties like tend to be more individualistic, right? Um, Conservatives in my opinion tend to be more like reactionary, right? They see because we're meant to conserve, right? They see something being pulled far to the left, right? And then all of a sudden you hear them like, "Oh no, 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 no." And then like, all right, things simmer down and then they kind of go away. And then another pull. And then no, 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 you know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I see from conservatives. And as far as Twitch goes, like why you don't see like an abundance of them. Like there's a couple here and there, but the reason why you don't see an abundance of them is the the audiences on Twitch tend to primarily be, you know, left leaning, you know. Like for whatever reason, that's the way it is. You'll find a decent amount of conservative streamers, right?
Yeah.
Or content creators on YouTube. You won't find them here on Twitch. So YouTube tends to be more of the conservative, you know, streaming platform or podcast or content platform, you know, just
Right.
in general. Um, so whereas Twitch is not, and Twitch also has a very strict TOS policy.
What's TOS stand for?
Terms of service.
Oh, okay.
Um, where like a bunch of conservatives who hold um views, let's say, demeaning of a certain type of people, right?
Races and
Um,
genders.
yeah, races and genders, like wouldn't be even welcome on this platform, you know?
Yeah.
And nor do I really think, like, I don't agree with them, but, you know, I think, you know, with the First Amendment, they should be allowed to have their horrible opinions, and then we should be able to judge them for it. You know, that's kind of my opinion, but
No.
that's kind of what I see. You
Yeah.
know, um, I would like to see more righties on here, which is another reason why I'm here to kind of so this way it's not quite such an echo chamber for the left
Right.
as as it is currently. You know,
Echo chambers are boring. Let's call it what it is. You know.
yeah.
Yeah, they really are.
I mean, there's a lot of infighting on the left, so like really the Twitch lefty echo chamber really isn't that boring because there's so much freaking drama and infighting.
Yeah.
But um but as far as like having conversations with like righties, it's not really there unless you're doing like panels or you know, like my content is that's what I'm trying to do is have conversations with lefties, righties, everybody, you know, and
Right.
just to prove we're all not freaking insane. And if someone is insane, then you know I'm gonna tell them they're insane, and then they'll probably hang up on me or curse me out. But whatever.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I see these conversations, I think that more people should be jumping in. I mean, and this isn't just like Twitch. I would also like to throw this out just for like politicians as far as how they view where they campaign at or where they or where they go and make their stops at. I feel like Democrats are too comfortable going into liberal friendly places, and Republicans seem to be too comfortable going into Republican friendly places. And people just seem very uncomfortable as a whole in being in a place where they're going to be challenged, you know? And I'm like, how are you going to
uh,
ever shift this Overton window? I mean, obviously not you. You're not afraid of being challenged. I'm talking about as a whole right
yeah.
now. Like you never if you are on the right and you are afraid of this Overton window shifting left, then I would think, as you have done, you would come into this space and basically just more or less just throw your opinion out. Just like, hey, maybe we're not thinking about this perspective. Hey, maybe we're not thinking about that perspective. Like maybe, let's talk about this, that, and the third. Of course, you're going to have people on the left who are very obstinate and don't want to hear any opinion other than their own. But there are plenty of people who want to have these conversations, but you're never going to have them if more people aren't trying to engage.
No, very true. Um, and like I would love to see more conservatives here, you know. Um, and I also would love to see the Republican Party. Oh, shit. Sorry. Um, kind of like reform and change, you know, for the better.
Yeah.
To be more like accepting. But I guess like from what I see from a lot of conservatives, right? A lot of them tend to you know, obviously they the majority of them tend to do like manual labor, right? Um, so they're busy working. A lot of them have families and or they're farmers or whatever. Um, so they don't necessarily have the time or the desire to or well, I guess the desire, but they don't exactly have the time to sit down and have these conversations on these platforms because they might have time to like comment on a Facebook post and be like, "Oh my God, you guys are insane," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that I don't think that they necessarily have the time, like me and you sit here like, well, we've been talking like an hour and a half already,
Yeah.
you know? I don't think that's a thing for them,
No, you're
you know?
absolutely right. I mean, accessibility is a big thing because I think how we started this conversation originally was talking about how most people are casual observers, right? Like they
Yep.
don't have and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just most people just either don't have or don't want to make the time for politics because politics is, I mean, can be infuriating, you know? Most
Yeah.
people check out until they feel like they're forced to check in. And
Yep.
that's 100% understandable. But I feel like any industry, it's up to the people who are inside of it in order to when you are presenting information to present it in a way that's, makes people feel invited into the conversation.
For sure.
And that's something that I try to do. I try to
Yep.
make my information when I'm putting it out there palatable for even the most casual person who's just checking in. So that way it doesn't feel like you have to be of a certain mindset to understand what the conversation is.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not gonna throw out like all the big words out there, you know?
First of all, I don't have all the big words. But secondly, honestly, the one thing that drives me the most crazy is the idea that there are people who don't get that the for me it's about the goal. And for me, when I'm having conversations like this, my goal is to move from where we're at, which is a problem, towards a solution. And I feel like you can't get there if you're losing people along the way in your explanation of how you get from problem to solution. So it's very vital in order to explain things logically and coherently along the way. And so yeah, if you're talking about, subjects that people can't follow along with for one reason or another, then what's the whole point of doing this in the first place other than maybe what to stroke your own ego? Like I've
Yeah.
never subscribed to that as far as like let me talk about how smart I am so that everyone else can tell me how great I am.
Yeah.
I'm not that person.
What was that one poll that you had on your channel or on your Instagram that
It's been a lot.
that I know like I want to scroll back through our DMs and see because there was one that I remember you telling me about that like I was going to be really surprised about.
Oh,
I
maybe the abolish the police.
was it the abolish the police?
I mean, that's the first one that comes to mind because I do have a liberal audience, and that one I think actually went like more than 50%. I think it was like 53-47, but it was 53 against abolishing the police.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It probably was that one because I was like, there's no way, there's no way that
That my lefty
that
audience would be against abolishing the police.
yeah. And then I remember you pissing your your fan base off about the should Trump be in or if someone offered you $1 million
Oh,
or
yeah.
Trump would be in jail. and like
Oh
and
my
like that
God, the amount of DMs I got for that. Oh my God.
and more people wanted Trump in jail, right?
I mean, so this was a twofold thing. First of all, this happened on Twitter. Not on my account, but on somebody else's. Somebody asked that question. And I responded basically saying something along the lines that, you know, I can't imagine, living such a life of privilege where I could legitimately turned down $100,000 just to see somebody else go to jail. And then I literally had like people, I think like close to 60 people like my comment, but then I also had like 60 people comment about how terrible of a person I was for saying that. And tell me about like, oh well, if you think $100,000 is a whole lot of money, then obviously you have more problems than than blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, so
Jesus.
I'm like, so you're proving in real time what I'm saying then.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, it's like sometimes they're just so out of touch from reality, man. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, $100,000 might not be much to you, but to me or you or
that's
a
life
bunch of other
changing.
people out there. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Like,
that's a life changing amount of money. Like, what do you mean? It's like okay, it's like
yeah,
okay. So I turn down 100 grand and Trump goes to jail, and all of a sudden Trump going to jail makes my life better? No.
no, it really doesn't.
I'm sorry. Like and this is probably like where I detract from other people on the left. Like, do I think that Trump has done things that should have landed him in jail? Yeah. Do I think that things that happened under the Obama administration should have led Obama to go to jail? I think so, yeah. Bush? Yeah. Clinton?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, like, H.W. Bush? I mean, like, honestly, just go back down the line. We have our presidents are more or less like, I hate to say it so blatantly, but like, they've all done things that you could argue are criminal. We are just
exactly.
currently living in a time where Trump's stuff was just overly reported on. That does not
Yeah,
mean that these other presidents haven't done criminal activities. I mean, do you know what we did to people in Guantanamo Bay? I mean, do
exactly.
you know how many civilians were killed underneath Obama's drone strike policy? Like, I mean, like these are war crimes, but
Yeah,
no one's calling for their heads. I'm just like, I understand that Trump's not a good person. Like, you don't have to convince me of that. I've done my own episodes on how terrible a person that I think he is, but don't tell me that, I have to turn down a life changing amount of money to put one criminal in jail. I'm
yeah.
sorry. Like, that's not changing the world. It really isn't. And I'm a person who makes a podcast who thinks in some bullshit, fantasy world that I can help change the world. So don't tell me about wanting to change the world, motherfucker. Okay.
Right. Yeah, it's like I don't know. Like you touch on something that's like really like it is really eye-opening to people who aren't like politically engaged, right? Where it's like basically every president, in recent history can be labeled as a war criminal.
Yeah.
And like they've all committed war crimes. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Whether it be, uh, I don't know if Clinton did. Was Clinton the end of Desert Storm? I forget.
Uh,
Or was that just HW? Obviously, I was
I think
born
it
during the
went
Clinton
into
years.
I think it went into both because I think that those golf I think went from like 90 to 93 I think it was. So it might have been the
Okay.
beginning of Clinton. But
Okay, yeah. I was born that time, so dude, I was obviously not politically
yeah,
engaged.
no, I was born in 90, so I mean, obviously when I'm 2 years old, I wasn't in front of the TV thinking about Bill Clinton. Um, my first political
Oh,
memory is from the 2000 election.
oh, with the whole Florida thing?
I remember sitting in front of the TV with my grandparents and them starting to do that Florida recount. Well, not like starting that night, but them being like, we don't know what's happening in Florida, and like I was just like, I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I was like, what is this? But yeah,
uh, I didn't really have a bunch of political memories. Like my family never really talked about it much.
yeah,
You know, they're both like in the military, but
yeah,
so obviously they were Republican. Um, especially in those times when it was like um Republican good military, Democrat bad military. You know what I mean?
yeah. I guess kind of. I have two family members. Actually, I have three family members who are in the who were either in or currently are still in the military. They're all Democrats.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just saying like back,
Yeah, probably like
we're
20
talking,
years ago.
yeah, we're talking 20 years ago.
Yeah.
you know, but now I think like the military is definitely much more diverse because they've realized like the Republicans have kind of fucked them, and then the Democrats still fuck them. So it's like
It's just
they're
how you
kind
want
of
to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're kind of in the middle now. So whatever. But yeah, no, I never really had those political memories until, I guess Obama being elected in 2008. That was my freshman year of sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
There was like a mock election in high school, and it was like this big deal.
Right.
I think I voted for Obama, but like I didn't fucking know anything.
I mean,
You
who
know?
does when you're a teenager? I mean,
Yeah.
truthfully, I mean, I honestly feel like my political beliefs are still being shaped, and I'm 30
Oh
years
yeah.
old. So I'm like, and I have like almost a decade of being engaged in politics behind me. So, I mean, when you're in high school, Jack, your beliefs are usually your parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I was like a staunch Republican, I guess, coming out of high school because my parents, were
Yeah.
both like hard Republicans, but like through the years I've definitely shifted more towards the middle. Especially when it comes to like the gay rights or the trans rights or, um like racism was never a thing for me, so like I didn't really shift there, but
Yeah.
um like as far as being more like not necessarily accepting, but more educated in like the LGBTQ kind of stuff,
Right.
because I didn't know fuck all about that,
They're not
I'm just
really
like cool,
conversations that we ever had growing up.
no,
Like
and
anyone.
I'm like, oh cool, like they love each other, all right, cool, like go do your thing.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize like it was illegal for them to get married. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's
You know?
amazing how many like disgusting things you find out about our country like once you start like going out of your way to learn. I
Yeah.
mean like I didn't know I think until a few years ago that it wasn't until the late 1960s that it became legal for white people and black people to get married. Like I didn't know it was
Oh,
illegal
really?
until that point.
Oh,
Like
shit.
that is horrendous. Like, that is fucking horrendous. Like I just
Yeah.
so many just like black eyes on this country. I mean, not just talking about like like civil rights. I mean that's a whole just conversation. But like I mean just down the line. This is a
Yeah.
country full of issues. I mean civil rights, economic. I mean just like things we do abroad. It's just like there's a litany of fucked up shit that we've done.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch more fucked up shit that we do.
Oh yeah.
Um, but, like I think it's a testament to you though that your political opinions are still being shaped, and I think mine are as well. Um, like I think that's very, very good because we're not locked into, we kind of touched on this earlier, but we're not locked into one side or the other. You know,
No.
if like there's a Democrat that I really, really like that's running, all right, cool. If there's, a libertarian I really, really like that's running,
Yeah.
cool. You know, sure, it's a libertarian party, so they're probably not going to win, but hey, you know what? I want to vote for like who I agree with most and who I like the most.
Man, I got so many feelings on libertarians. So many feelings on these people. I agree with your sentiment, though. I mean, honestly, that is, like I was saying earlier, that's like the gist of why I called this whole thing independent thought. I
Yeah.
don't ever want to get to a point where like the Democrats feel like I'm going to vote for them every time because I'm like, no, I don't owe you my vote. Like you have to earn it each and every time. You're just fortunate right now that the Republicans seem to have no interest in making themselves more palatable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an entire can of worms, man. With the Republicans not being, necessarily acceptable. You know, and it's very frustrating to me, especially when it comes to like simple things such as um, gay rights or abortion or trans rights. You know, I do kind of get a little iffy with the sports thing with the trans, but Armand says, wait, politicians have to earn the vote. That's just being radical. But you know what I mean? I wish that they would just be more acceptable, like in those like social settings, like in those social issues,
Yeah.
because I feel like it would broaden their horizons, like it would bring so many more people into the party. Unfortunately, you have to deal with like the freaking evangelicals and whatever, but
You know what? Yeah. Honestly, when I see the Republican Party, it feels to me like it feels like laziness, honestly. It feels like instead of trying to find ways to diversify their party or expand the party or going into these places that they're normally not in and trying to branch out, like it seems like their goals for maintaining power is just to restrict voting. And I'm sure you would love to talk about that debate. Because that feels like more or less what the goal is here is like, let's not be more appealing. Let's just make it hard for people to vote. Then we'll win. And that's just kind of nonsense to me because, like, honestly, like, no bullshit. I've heard so much talk over the last year from Republicans talking about how these Democrat cities and these Democrat states are so messed up. It's just like, if you feel that way, then go run in those cities or go run in those states. I mean, like, convince the people of those areas that you have the better policies.
yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And but I will say that some of the voting bills that were passed, I don't necessarily have a huge issue with, in
Yeah, I mean, I'll
principle.
take them one at a time. I mean, I gotta
Yeah.
say, yeah, with the Georgia one, I know that that was a hot button topic. I don't have the list in front of me again like I did before, but I remember looking through the list of the Georgia voting bill and thinking to myself, not everything here is bad, but there is like one or two things I think are egregious. I mean, the whole not being able to hand out food or water thing to people standing in line, that's just absolute fucking bullshit. Like there's no getting
Yeah.
around that. Like I don't there is no argument that you can present to me that makes that make sense.
No, I agree with you on that point. It's like, what? Like,
Yeah.
all right. Like, I could see you making the point if like a political candidate is out there like handing out food and water. You know what I mean? Like, all right, I could see how you kind of draw that line. Like, all right, they're trying to bribe a vote,
Right,
but
but yeah.
but we're talking about everybody. Like, if like I like how would you feel, right, if it was like political candidates cannot give out food and water during long lines? Like, how would like would you have a huge issue with that?
I'd have no issue with that. Like, I mean, how hard is it to write that into the bills? Like, you can hand out food or water as long as you're not, like promoting X candidate while doing so. Like, that wouldn't be hard to write that in if that was really the concern, but that's not how they wrote it, right?
Yeah, no, of course not. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, it would just make too much sense because no, they're like, oh, here, Democrats, here's a layup for you to just dunk on us. You know what I mean? It's like, come on. Um, but like as far as like the whole ID thing, I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm like, I don't really see a problem with it. Yes, it's changing the rules for voting, but I don't see a problem with providing ID to vote. I
No.
just don't see it.
This is where, again, I detract with other people on the left because here's my thing. I've heard that certain states want to have there be a separate ID that's called like your voter ID, which is separate than your driver's license. That part makes no sense to me. But the idea of having ID in general to vote, I don't have an issue with that. If the issue is that people in poor communities are having a harder time getting access to identification, then the answer shouldn't be, well, let's not require identification to vote. The answer should be, let's make it easier for people to get identification. Like
Hmm.
that's how I would approach that. I'm like, okay, if people in poor communities who typically are people of color are having a hard time getting IDs, let's help these people get IDs then. Because I
Yeah.
don't think it is I don't think it is unreasonable to ask people to have ID to vote. I do think it's unreasonable to have a separate ID to vote. That seems like bullshit to me. Like your driver's license should be good across the fucking board because you have to I mean, for most parts, you usually have to give what? Your social security card and your birth certificate and some other piece of information to get said driver's license, especially now with these real IDs. And so
Yeah.
now to
Yep.
have that and then you're like, "Oh, well now you have to have your separate voter ID card." Like get the fuck out of here with that. That is voter
Yeah.
suppression.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand that. But I don't necessarily, obviously we kind of agree with this that like providing ID to vote, isn't necessarily like isn't like it isn't racist. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not. I didn't like how it was classified like immediately as racist, um,
Right. And I
because like I feel like that's basically telling people of a certain community that they're like not able to go get an ID, like they're not capable,
right.
and I don't like thinking about society like that, you know?
Well, here's my thing. Like I know that it's harder to get them in these communities because you have sometimes millions of people in some of these cities, and going to the DMV is a nightmare in a rural community, let alone in a place like that, right? And
True.
so, I mean, obviously, it's not always as accessible to get to these places who are only open Monday through Friday, so not open on the weekends, and you have working class people who can't take the time to go there in a place that only has so many of these places. And so I get how it disproportionately affects black and brown people that they don't have as much of an easy access time getting to get these licenses. But, like I feel like if that is the issue, that seems like a very direct thing to address. Like, okay, people in these communities are having a harder time getting ID. Let's help them get ID. The same way that we created vaccination sites, we could create little mobile sites for people to get their identification. Like there's
Yeah,
simple solutions here. We just have to take them.
exactly. And then also there were some like really good things in like in reference to like the Georgia voting bill, right? They did extend early voting, I believe, on the weekends, right?
Yeah, they extended it a
Um,
couple out. I think it used to be just Saturdays, and I think they included like every other Sunday in there.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
something
that,
like that.
and like there were some like actually decent things in there. Like it
Yeah, it was a
almost
mixed bag.
felt, yeah, it almost felt like the Republicans were actually trying to compromise it with making it easier to vote in some instances, but then also harder to vote in some instances, you
Right.
know? So it 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 honestly almost felt like like not necessarily bipartisan, but like it kind of gave the Democrats kind of some things that they look for in voting, making voting more accessible and easier. But then it also kind of did obviously what Republicans like, which is, you require ID. I don't I still don't, I won't ever understand the whole drink in line thing, whatever. But,
No.
um, but you know what I mean? Like, I did feel like there, there was some things that both sides should be happy about. It wasn't just like, uh,
No.
fuck,
But
fuck you,
I
only
understand the
vote one
backlash
day.
though. I understand the backlash though because just that one like food and drink thing alone, like when people called that bill racist, it honestly, while I hate that word being used in places where it shouldn't be used because I feel like it diminishes it, the word racist. I understood why you would use it in that context because the only time that people would be standing in long ass lines where they would need food or drinks is if they're standing in lines for hours. And the only places where you see people standing in line for hours are in areas that have higher populations. Now, who lives in the areas that have higher populations, right? You're talking about the main. You're talking about like the
Yeah.
inner cities, and so like I get that. And Georgia's coming off an election where they just turned a different color, right? And so they're trying to just find ways to trim around the edges a little bit at the expense of a certain block of voters. And I honestly, I gotta say, it is so hypocritical seeing conservatives do this. It really is, because this is the exact same party that says that any kind of restriction on gun rights is such an abhorrent thing to do to our constitutional rights. But then they want to turn around and trim around so many voting rights as if those aren't constitutional rights that we're all given as well. So it's like, how can you with a straight face say that when the Democrats come after guns in any sort of way, it's like abhorrent evil, but when you come after voting in little ways here and there, that it's totally acceptable. Those two pieces of logic don't exactly pair up together.
No, I mean, I see your side of it. For sure. I think like as far as voting, voting is not necessarily tough to be able to do, you know? And I don't think like it's necessarily still going to be tough to be able to do, because like I know the left makes it a meme like, oh, it's easier to buy a gun in Georgia than it is going to be to vote. And I'm like,
I mean, that's
not
kind of,
really.
I mean, it's kind of true. I mean, not saying that either one of
No,
them is like intended. I mean, not saying that like voting's going to be hard, but it probably would be easier to get a gun than it would be to vote.
no, because you still need an ID to get a gun.
Right,
You
but how
can't
quickly
just.
do you get that gun versus how quickly does it take you to vote?
Well, I mean, it depends. It depends on your background. Because there's always a background check.
Is there always a background check though?
There is always I get a background check every time.
Okay.
There is always a background check.
Because I thought that was a state
Um,
by state specific thing.
no, it's a federal thing, I believe. I believe it is a federal background check. Here, I'm just
We'll
gonna,
put a pin in that one. Come back to it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that one, but like I'm 99% sure that it's a federal background check. But yeah, like so it's not necessarily easier to vote to buy a gun. It's not necessarily easier to buy a gun. As much as they'd like you to believe. Is it a little bit tougher than it was before? I guess, yeah, but uh, all right, like that's their state legislator that passed it. Like that's the states. The states run their own elections, So if there's a massive amount of pushback, right, against this voting rights, this voting bill,
Yeah.
then I believe that the state legislator will end up flipping, you know?
Yeah. I'm just coming from my own opinion. I just do not see any issue with people voting however they want to, more or less. Like I don't think there should be restrictions on like voting by mail. I mean, I don't think there should be restrictions. I mean, I think you should be able to vote online, honestly. Because here's my whole thing, right? I know that people are worried about fraud in an age of stop the steal. So I'm talking to people on the right now. But here's my whole thing. If we can do our taxes through H&R Block, then there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to vote online. Because at the end of the day, if they're able to verify your identity one way, they should be able to verify your identity another way. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no reason why those two things are mutually exclusive.
No, of course. But I guess like the reason why, like, I'm just thinking off the top of my head because I haven't really put much thought behind like the taxes and the voting thing,
Yeah.
right? Um, like taxes, like voting is a very, very sacred thing in our country. Obviously, probably taxes are to the government too, but
And to all
fuck
of us who
taxes.
hate paying taxes.
Yeah, fuck taxes. But um,
I mean, honestly, I
but
just hate paying taxes for the wrong reasons. I mean, I don't mind paying
well, yeah,
taxes to the right people. I mean, like, I like my fire
yeah,
department. I think that they should get my taxes for sure.
Oh no, for sure. But I guess like voting is so sacred. Like we want it to be as like 100% secure as possible, you know, and for like the trust of the people. And I think like having a chain of custody, you know, is very important when it comes to voting. You know,
Yeah.
whether you know, so this way you know where your ballot's going at all times. Sorry. Armand says if legislators want to make voting easier, just expand early voting. Voting only would complicated secret ballots. Not a good thing. Voting online. Oh, voting online would complicate.
No, I
Okay,
understand
I
because
got you.
I feel like the issue that most people have with voting is they just want to know that there's nothing nefarious happening when it comes to voting. And I don't want that either. But I feel like these things, again, don't have to be mutually exclusive. We can find creative solutions so that it's easier for people to vote while also maintaining the integrity of the elections. Like, I think what really happened this past year wasn't so much that people were really upset about mail in voting. I think people just don't know exactly how the election process works. And that's kind of a failure of all 50 states and the federal government. Like, we shouldn't have this much just like murkiness when it comes to our elections. I mean, I don't know exactly what a system would look like, but I think there's a way that you could create a system in which you could actually watch votes being counted on every like either county or state level. And so, and obviously people don't probably want it to be out there like, oh, my name's on that ballot. Now you know who I voted for, but rather like maybe each ballot having its own unique ID number. And so when you're seeing that ballot being cast or being like counted with someone in a room with a fucking camera, you can know in real time that that was your ballot, but nobody else knows it. You know, like, I mean, I'm sure that there can be ways where we can do both, where we can,
Yeah,
you know, keep it secure, keep it transparent, and open up accessibility.
yeah. And I think like early voting is a good thing, you know, and I think a lot of the Republican bills, you know, in regards to like the voting rights or whatever, right? Voting
Yeah,
access, I guess I would say, would actually do expand early voting, right? Which is a good thing, you know. And I think, like I said, it's kind of a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag of good and bad between, you know, just like a lot of bills, you
yeah.
know, that
I've
get
seen
passed.
that
It's a mixed
9 of
bag.
them have passed so far. I haven't looked at each one of them individually. I know that I think Iowa passed something. I think Texas did. I think South Dakota did. We changed some stuff here in Montana, which just made absolutely no sense to me because we had literally no cases of voter fraud, yet they still took away same day registration here in Montana, which we've had for decades. I'm just like, okay, so you had no problem but still felt the need to change something? Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, it's just it's so reactionary, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it feels like a virtue signal on the Republican legislature's part, especially in a state like this, because we had the largest turnout that we've had in this state's history in Montana, and Donald Trump won overwhelmingly, and the Republicans won they won every single state house that they were facing a Democrat in. They won
Yep.
our one at-large House seat. They won the Senate race. They won the governorship, and they still want to make election reforms. I'm like, for what? You
Chris.
just sweeped. Like, what are you doing?
Hey, you know what? Maybe it'll come back to bite him in the ass though in my you never know.
Yeah,
You know,
it just
like,
blew me
it's very
away.
possible, you know, and I don't know. It's all just very interesting, you know, to see how it's all going to play out because
Yeah,
like my biggest issue like with like the HR1 bill that the Democrats are trying to pass though is
yeah.
that it's trying to federalize the elections,
Ah,
you
okay.
know, where it seems to be more like a hey, let the federal government take care of all the elections and it's like you guys aren't supposed to be that big, you know? And it's like,
Actually, that's in the Constitution.
what? Federalizing elections?
Yes.
Well,
I
no,
have
this,
no, I have that
yeah.
article. Yeah, hold on. I that was actually part of my Joe Manchin episode. I think it's I think it's so what's it, Section 4, Article 1? Hold on. I do have this. It does say specifically that that states legislatures are supposed to govern their elections, but at any time Congress can come in and make changes if they see fit.
Well, yeah, but it says they can, but I don't like it.
but it's in the
I,
Constitution that they do have the power to do so if they want to.
okay. Yeah, but I mean, the states in general, though, are supposed to run their own elections, right? Unless Congress is like, "Oh no, we don't like what they're doing." Now that it might go against us, that's kind of the way I see it. So that's
No,
why,
you're seeing it the right way, but at the same time, in a time where we talk about the powers that the Constitution provides, that is a power that was incepted. So it's not like
yeah,
they're creating an authority that they didn't previously have.
yeah, for sure. And I think like honestly, that's definitely a big divide that conservatives and lefties tend to have, though, is like we prefer the states to more handle things or more localized stuff,
Hmm.
whereas Democrats seem to push more federally for things versus statewide. Except maybe like the exception is like fucking California, you know, or like Oregon. You know what I mean? There
Yeah,
are exceptions to that rule, but it does seem that they tend to be more federally inclined than state inclined.
I got two things on that. Um, One, I will say that it does seem that way, but I often question that, especially here. I'll give you a little example of some local stuff happening in my state. Republicans have forever been complaining about, this exact model about like, oh, well, the federal government, like just does its own thing. We should be able to legislate ourselves to the state level. Well, at the state level, um, the Republicans just took back the governor's mansion. Montana is a red state, but has had a Democrat governor for the last 16 years. Now, a Republican just took back over the governorship, and during the legislative session, just passed several bills that took away power from local governments and consolidated it on the state level, so that local governments couldn't make laws about like guns or health care or affordable housing measures, just whatever the case may be, things that they were all against, but they took them out of the hands of local city and county governments and said that only the state laws could, be in effect for a lot of these key issues. And so in real time, they talked about how they didn't like the idea of a federal government making laws where the states couldn't govern themselves. But then on the state level, they were like, you local governments can't govern yourselves. We can only do that here at the state level. So obviously, you don't know anything going on about Montana politics, but I thought that was insanely hypocritical on their part.
In a way, I kind of see what you're talking about, but in another way, I don't. Well, I kind of like think in a different direction.
Yeah.
Because I see what you're saying, how you're kind of drawing the parallel between, like a state is basically like a mini country with all these different counties,
Right.
which is then made up by all these different municipalities,
Yeah.
and so like I kind of see where you're going with that, but I believe like we're made like our country is made by a union of states, right? So basically the state government should have final say with everything in the state, right? Um,
But that logic wouldn't just transfer over from the state to the country.
no.
I mean, you see what I'm saying, though, right? It feels like it's
I
a direct correlation.
yeah, I might not be like phrasing my argument correctly. But um no, like state governments are supposed to kind of operate and do what's I'm not wording this correctly at all.
It's okay. I think more or less what I was just trying to say was I think the spirit behind the argument is that individual communities understand the needs of their people better than the centralized power would because they're detached from the individual community. And so when I think about my local county not being able to enact affordable housing measures and the state saying that like you can't do that because we no longer grant you that power, that feels kind of awful on our hands because like while what we want to do here may not be appropriate in the county next to us, it is appropriate in the county here. And for the fact that the state to step in and say, well, we're just like banning this practice from the entire state doesn't make any sense because like yeah, county next to us they don't need this, but we do. So what the hell? And now we can't use it.
Yeah. Um, Interesting. No, I mean like I do see your parallels. I personally would like to see, things be as local as possible, you
Yeah.
know. Obviously I am not a Montana politics expert.
Right, right. I'm throwing random stuff at you right now.
But no, I would like to see things at a more localized level, for reasons being, different regions of the country need different policies, and for the
I agree
federal
with that.
government to come in, and be like, no, this is blanket how everything's going to be, I think obviously with certain things, makes a lot of sense. Like, obviously slavery or segregation or gay marriage or,
It's
you
an
know what I
issue
mean?
by issue thing. You know,
Yeah.
I think more or less, I think I agree with you on that. I think it's an issue by issue thing. I would like to see more things handled at the state level. On the
Yeah.
election side of it, how we started this conversation, I think I'm slightly in between the left and where you're at. Because I think for me,
Yeah.
I'm not against the federal government stepping in the case of HR 1, or, but I think that I don't know that I would have it be across the board for all elections. I think that I don't mind Congress stepping in and saying that we're going to regulate your federal elections, but you can still do your state and local elections however you see fit.
Yeah.
So
See, but
that's how I
there
would
is,
do it.
but the issue there is, right? Like the federal and state elections have they're all on one ballot. One second. We have a question from chat
Oh, okay.
from Dark Sage.
You had a lot of people come in the chat. Have your following's gone up quite a bit the last like couple weeks, huh?
Yeah, I've been averaging like two, three, four viewers. We got up to six earlier, but
Nice,
not that
nice.
much. But yeah, no, I'm getting there. I'm getting closer and closer to affiliate. Um, Dark Sage says, I know this is off topic, but it seems as if Eric Adams is going to be the nominee for the Democrats in the New York City primary.
Uh,
This race has gained attention in recent months as Adams is not a kind of candidate that progressives and Democrats want leading a ticket. I'm curious if he is the nominee, how close do Republicans come to winning the mayoral election? I know they have no chance to win, but